Hey, BizBlend listeners, it is that weird time of year where your brain is half new year, new me, and half where did I put my charger? So, holidays bring joy, chaos, and a lot of online activity. Travel bookings, gift receipts, delivery texts, family group chats, donation links, random QR codes at events. It is a lot. And it's also when scammers they go full on beast mode. Not because you are careless, because you're human, you're busy, you are emotionally open, you are moving fast. So today on this episode of the BizBlend podcast with your host Sana, that is me, we are going to talk about something that sounds corporate, but is actually super personal. Identity theft prevention. Not just your own life, listeners, but as a shortcut to upgrading company security too. Because here's the hot take: if you can protect your identity, you can protect your workplace. If you cannot, no amount of software or compliance is going to save you. And to break this down with zero tech jargon and maximum real talk, I am joined by Robert Siciliano. He is a private investigator, certified speaking professional, CEO of Protect Now, and creator of the strategic human firewall. He's also basically the media's go to cybersecurity expert. So, Robert, welcome to BizBlend. It's real an honor to have you here with us.
It is great to be here. I appreciate your time.
Super. Okay. All right. Robert, you have said a line and it really hits different. All security is personal. So before we get into the tactics, explain what you mean by that in a way that a business owner and also regular person, just trying to survive their inbox can both understand.
So, all security begins with you and your being, right? So, when it comes to, say, physical security, you think
Mm.
predators, you think bad guys, you think a mugger, a thief, you think somebody that might mean to do you harm. And so, to get your physical security in order, you would need to understand like the basics of how to avoid and remove yourself from a dangerous situation. And that usually begins with, the absolute basics like running. Running is always a good thing, getting away from the bad guy. But then of course, self-defense, knowing how to, if necessary, physically debilitate another human being. Like that is one of those unfortunate things in life that you just may need to know how to do. And so physical security begins with your person, your being, right? And then once you understand like the absolute basics of how to physically protect yourself, then you can teach like your loved ones, your spouse, your kids, your daughter who's going off to college, okay? And then your identity, right? Your identity is very personal to you. Your name, your address, your personal identifying information, right? Your most sensitive information is very personal to us. And
Mm.
understanding how to protect your own identity, I think, is in line with how to protect your own physical being. Because when you think about it, predators and thieves, like these are a small segment of the population that they've always been out there. They always have been, they are, and they'll always be there. They're always
Mm.
looking for, their next mark or the next victim. And our job is to become a tougher target. Our job is to do things to make it less so that they would choose us. And that means, putting basic systems in place, like knowing how to physically defend yourself, doing different things to protect your identity, managing your passwords, protecting your credit cards, protecting your hardware and your software. And so when an employee engages in the process of protecting themselves in the
Mm.
physical world, right? They're developing a mindset for personal protection. And then when they evolve to protect their own identity, right, from, say, criminal hackers and such, now they're actively engaged in, information security, data security,
Yeah.
computer security. And all that is very personal to us. And we are, obviously, like a selfish or self-interested creature. And that's not
Mm.
necessarily a bad thing. Like you do need to take care of yourself first.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then once you do, in regards to your security, then you're able to educate those around you as to what their goals and responsibilities are to protect themselves too. It becomes a it becomes a process of not
Mm.
just protecting yourself, but teaching others to protect them. And because the way I see it, we're all in this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really love that line. We're all in this together because it's a beautiful blend of individuality and also community as well. That's what we need right now. And one thing that, I have observed, like when we talk in the context of companies or workplaces, that at the end of the day, it all boils down to this boring security or data information security training. It just gets reduced to maybe a PPT or a document. That's it. There is no real world discussion here that how maybe phishing can be dangerous, or identity theft. As you explained, how easily or maybe through any such means of communication, our details are available. Where do you think exactly is the gap in there?
Excellent question. So,
Mm,
the most corporations, government agencies, those who engage in basics of security awareness training, they're
mm,
providing something we call phishing simulation training. And
okay.
phishing simulation training is just that. It simulates the scammy fishes that we would receive via email. And
Mm,
pardon me. And while those phishing simulation training emails are important and necessary to educate us on how to deal with and mitigate phishing emails, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem of personal security. I think that
mm,
the phishing simulation training is primarily a check the box compliance type of security awareness that organizations need to and should engage in, specifically, to reduce a certain level of risk, but that doesn't necessarily move the needle to get the employee to really care about security. They might have a better understanding about how to avoid a phishing email in both their personal and professional life. But at the same time, the phishing simulation is kind of being forced down their throat. In other words, they're required to take this type of training, and they don't quite fully understand why, nor do they even think that it's necessary for them to do it. Like they think that security should be the job of the company officer, the chief information security officer, the CIO, or the CTO. And so they don't think that they should have to engage in it at all. And then part of the phishing simulation is this might sound a bit odd, but there is a little bit of shame involved in it. So, like, if the employee gets it wrong, they're kind of scolded in a certain way. Not always, but there's a certain element of that to that type of training that when you get it wrong, they may encourage you a little bit to get it right next time. They may not necessarily scold you, but
mm,
they do make, in many cases, the employee feel a bit, I guess, less than, right?
yeah.
And what security awareness training should do is it should empower the individual. It should make them feel as if, they got this, like they understand it, they want it, they need it, like it's within their capacity. It's something that they want to engage in. And if you frame it in such a way where this is good for you because it protects your own identity, it protects your own bank account, it protects your loved ones, it protects your kids. If you frame it so that it's more self-interested, they're more likely to adopt it because, it directly improves the quality of their own lives.
Absolutely. That's very well said, Robert. It's basically like decentralizing, giving the power over to you so that it doesn't look like, I mean, I'm not generalizing, but still saying that, normally what, as an individual employee, I would foresee that, okay, if something goes wrong, first of all, I would be so ashamed. I would be fearful. I would be scared to even tell it to maybe my manager or um, maybe the team of CSO or whosoever is responsible for that. Secondly, it's very likely that I could be the scapegoat of that. I could I could just individually bear all the responsibilities. So basically, to avoid that, let me not even be aware about anything. it's up to me. So I think in that in whole that kind of mindset discussion, the aspect of personal security, especially identity theft, because we are heavily surrounded by social media and online stuff, financials, our personal details, everything. It kind of gets kind of diluted into that. And uh, you know y- you are basically saying if people practice protecting themselves, they build instincts that transfer to work. So it's basically muscle memory, not memorized rules or a checklist.
That's exactly correct.
Mm,
When you make all security personal to you, right?
mm,
It begins to mean something and matter at a higher level. So the way I've always framed security awareness training, right? So security awareness training essentially is phishing simulation training. It's
mm,
getting um in front of an instructor who educates you on all the various risks and what to do and what not to do. It's watching a pre recorded video that's maybe even cartoon based or a talking head who's explaining again, these are all the risks. This is what you do. This is what you don't do, and so forth, right? That is security awareness training. And the way I see that, like, that is an intellectual, it's in your head, it's an understanding, it's a do this, don't do that. Okay. And all that's good and well, and that's necessary. However, if you really want to move the needle and make the employee care about
mm,
security, you have
mm,
to affect who they are and you have to affect them emotionally to do that. And so, in order to do that, the way I frame security awareness training is at a higher level, we call it security appreciation training. And security appreciation training isn't at the head level, it's at the heart level. Okay. So, from the heart level, when I am aware of all these various issues, I understand all these various issues, but the solutions and protecting myself and protecting my loved ones, it really means something to me. It really matters to me on a heart level. Like, it's important to me. And I appreciate the value security has in my life. And when you elevate the employee from awareness to appreciation, now
mm.
they have a vested interest in
Yeah.
insecurity. Because it starts with them. It starts with their loved ones. It starts with their being. It starts with who they are and what they need to protect and their identity and their bank account and their money and their children. Like, all of that is heart based. That's how you get the employee to care about these things. And once they do, now you're all on the same team. It's not the employee kinda against the CISO, like, "Okay, yeah, my CISO is just a little bit paranoid. I have to do this because he or she is obsessive." It becomes, "Oh, my CISO really understands me and really cares about me and wants me to improve for me." And you frame it in that manner, the employee becomes part of the solution. And I don't know that anybody's actually effectively doing that. I don't know if that any other security awareness training is actually affecting people via the heart. And once you do, I've seen and I know the ROI is real.
Mm. And can you give okay, let's take top two personal identity mistakes that you see that directly translate into company breaches.
Sure. Yeah, there's so many. I think it all begins with the employee saying, this is not my responsibility. This is somebody else's responsibility. Right. So they shirk responsibility. And then from there, they don't think or want to believe it can happen to them. Right. So lack of responsibility and in denial. It can't happen to me. Those are the two biggest ways in which we as humans resist security. And then not understanding trust, right? So trust is a really big deal. So we as human beings, we are what is considered an interdependent species. And what that
Mhm.
means is, as an interdependent species, by default, We depend on each other for our survival. It's always been like that. It is like that and will always be like that. That means that, we require each other, of course, to procreate. And in order to be an interdependent species, we need to trust each other by default. And what that fundamentally means is from the moment you wake up every day, the people that you encounter, the phone calls you receive, the emails and text messages that you get, you fundamentally pretty much want to and generally need to pretty much trust most of the people, if not everybody that you meet and come in contact with. That trust is much more normal and much more natural than not trusting others. If you think about it, even people who say, I don't trust anybody, I don't really believe them. I think that they pretty much still do want to and need to trust pretty much everybody. We give the benefit of the doubt all day long. And so, not understanding trust and how it's by default and how essentially bad actors use our innate trust against us, I think is a significant liability. So when you understand how you naturally and normally want to and need to trust and give the benefit of the doubt all day, every day, when you understand that about yourself, then when the phone rings, when you get an email, when you get a text message, when you meet somebody in person, while you do trust your fellow humans, you learn to not necessarily trust each situation that you're in. And you become that much more aware and that much more appreciative of security and being cognitive of the motivations of others. And that might mean being cognitive of the bad intentions of others. And so it's these basics, taking personal responsibility, recognizing that we function in denial, understanding that trust is by default, not trusting is not natural and normal. But when we have this realization about us and others and just basic human function, we have we begin to develop a much higher level of security appreciation, and we become that much more aware of all the various tools and tactics at our disposal so we can be that much more secure both personally and professionally.
Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. And uh, can you help us with like a case study where actually, you worked on maybe a training where um, the security in person at an individual level was implemented and it actually directly contributed to the company's security infrastructure, something like that.
So here's how I can play that out. I get in front of live audiences all year long. That's what I do. I get on a,
Mhm.
on a platform on a stage, and I speak to hundreds and thousands of people on an annual basis. And the majority of the time, when I am speaking to an audience for the first time,
Mhm.
I'll ask them a series of questions, a series of qualifying questions, just to kind of get an idea of where they're at in regards to their own personal security.
Okay.
And one of the questions I ask is, and it's like the very first thing I ask them, and I ask them to raise their hand. I say, how many of you can honestly say that you use a different passcode across all of your critical accounts? In other words, you're never using the same passcode twice across all your critical accounts. If you can say that you use a different passcode across critical accounts, raise your hand. If I get 90, if I get 10% of the room to raise their hand, if I get 10% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means that about 90% are using the same passcode across all their various accounts. And then in the same breath, I asked the question, how many of you are using two-factor authentication across all your critical accounts, including email? If I get 10 to 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot. which means approximately 85 to 90% of the room are using are not using two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Okay. And so password management along with two-factor authentication in general, the audiences that I speak to the first time, they're pretty much like 80 to 90% of the room is not are not using the absolute basics, the absolute 101 of cyber hygiene, which is using a password manager that facilitates using a different passcode across multiple accounts and using two-factor authentication, which makes all of the exposed passwords on the dark web useless to the thief, right? And so when I get in front of that same audience a second time, generally in about a year's time, and I ask those same questions, it's usually flipped on its head, meaning that usually 85 to 90% of the room, the second time around, they are using a password manager, facilitating a different passcode across all their multiple accounts, and using two-factor authentication for all their various critical accounts. So they go from 80 to 85% not using two-factor authentication and not using a password manager to 85 to 90% using two-factor authentication and using a password manager. And that's what it takes. It takes getting in front of the audience, explaining what security is and isn't, having them recognize that trust essentially is overrated, that they trust too much, getting them to recognize and realize that many of them are functioning in denial, and ultimately having them see that once they appreciate the value security has in their life, they'll engage in it because it means something and it matters to them. It takes the initial wake up call, an initial challenge of their belief systems to get them to the point where they recognize security as something that is of significant value in their life. But it takes that awareness, it takes that appreciation at a higher level to get them to ultimately see how, for the majority of their lives, they've looked at security in all the wrong ways. And I've seen this happen over and over again where audience members will come up to me at the very end of the presentation and they'll say to me over and over again, I came here because my employer told me that I had to. I came here because I was forced to be here. I came here because it was just part of the curriculum, but I didn't really think that I needed it. And time after time, they say, I didn't think this presentation was going to be what it was. And I'm so glad that I came because it really does mean something and matter to me more so than it did before.
Absolutely.
And that's what security appreciation provides someone. It's a much higher level than security awareness. Security awareness just really scratches the surface, whereas security appreciation affects them on a heart level.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that. I agree with you. And I don't know whether it's a valid question or not, Robert, but um, as we see so many examples out there, people kind of would assume, because now we are working in a workplace setup where there are multiple generations involved. I mean, we have boomers, we have Gen X, we have millennials, we have Gen Zs. There's a very common assumption that okay, only maybe the old people who are not much of tech savvy, they are much more prone to all these, security threats and everything. I mean, I'm someone who was always surrounded by digital stuff, tech stuff. I know about password manager. I know about two-factor authentication. I know about it. So I'm not um, I'm not prone to all this. I'm actually very smart because I'm aware about it because I know how to use them. What's your opinion about this? Is this something kind of a more of coming from an ego point of view?
So interestingly, the younger generations who grew up with digital devices are, in fact, that much more tech savvy. They generally are a bit more capable of recognizing various scams.
Mm,
They are a bit more savvy when it comes to recognizing risk. The- but the big difference is with the older generation, say the baby boomers. Baby boomers, yes, they are less tech savvy. They are a bit too trusting as well. They
mm,
are a bit too trusting. But at the same time, they do make more of an effort to engage in basic security practices.
mm,
So the baby boomers are better at changing up their passcodes. They're better at enabling two-factor authentication. So I think the older generations do take security a bit more to heart than the younger generations. Uh, interestingly, but at the same time, the baby boomers are a bit more easily tricked, which is a big part of the problem. Because if you can be easily tricked, then you bypass all your existing security, and your existing security doesn't really matter so much if you are being tricked. So, um, there are risks with younger and older generations. In the end, again, we are all in this together. And as an interdependent species, we need each other, and we need to teach each other what these risks are so that we can appreciate the value security has in our lives. And we approach each situation when we encounter the bad actor around the same way. We need to encounter the bad actors with suspicion. If somebody means to do you harm, there's going to be telltale signs. They're going to ask for your passcodes. They're going to ask you to change up your passcodes. They're going to ask you to click links. They're going to ask you to download files. They're going to threaten that your loved one is, say, being kidnapped or has been arrested, and they're going to seek payment. And all of these ruses, all of these scams are designed to get your blood pressure up, no matter what your age is. And if we have these discussions with our loved ones as to what to look out for and to stop and think before you react, then I
mm.
think we all have a much better chance of fighting off the bad actors.
Absolutely, no doubt here, Robert. That's a very important point that you mentioned. And before we wrap up, as you mentioned, I think this is very much related to the question because I think, even the world of scams and threats and all, it's also advancing at a very huge rate because now we have AI here. And you talk about AI driven perfect lies, deep fakes, voice cloning. I mean, I have been looking at some of the videos surfacing online. I mean, if you would look at them at the first look, it wouldn't appear from any corner, any pixel that it is fake or is made by AI. I mean, it's kind of perfect. But deep down, when you actually analyze them, yeah, there are telltale signs. But then there's kind of a contradictory take here. Is this being like AI scams, is this being overhyped to scare people, or are most companies actually underreacting?
I think the issue that we face here is that the human voice can be 100% cloned, and the human ear cannot detect real or fake. That's problematic. So when your voice, my voice, is 100% cloned,
Mm,
and caller ID can be spoofed, which it can be, and your phone rings, and it's your mom or your dad or a sibling, and it's their voice with their caller ID, you are 99% at risk
yeah.
because you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference in the real or the fake voice, along with caller ID being spoofed. I think that it's likely just about 100% of us are going to fall for that.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's hype. I think that that's real. And that's happening right now. But it's not just the voice. Our faces, our likeness is pretty close to being 100% cloned. I would say the technology's there. I don't know that that technology is there for consumer use. I think the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world, and the companies that they're absorbing, they're buying, that have that perfect AI technology, have the ability to manipulate us or manipulate anybody with AI face swaps. I don't know that that is readily available for consumer use, but it's there. And we've seen already companies, individuals, employees be duped with AI face swaps. And that is a technology that, and I've been saying my entire adult life presenting these programs, don't worry about any of this, just do something about it. I am actually a bit worried at this point because AI face swaps are just about perfect. And once they are readily available for consumer use, I don't know that human beings are at all capable of determining real or fake, if ever. And I don't know that um, the tools will be readily available to make that determination. And so with things like FaceTime and Zoom and Google Meet,
Mhm.
those virtual meetings, we've already seen an employee, a CFO out of a company out of Hong Kong, be duped by a half a dozen people she was on a call with, and she transferred $25 million out of the account. That's the template. That's the boilerplate. That's where all these scams are heading right now. I don't think it's hype. I think it's real. And I think that the sooner that the consumer understands that, the sooner that the employee understands that it's out there and it's available, then the sooner the systems will be put in place to verify and authenticate who's real and who's fake.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I think it can be a hard truth to swallow, uh, personally for me as well. But I think that's the reality we are in. And of course, there are way arounds here. Are there any specific practices that you can at least advise all of us, Robert? Maybe in
At a,
some way.
at a minimum, if a loved one's in distress, at a minimum, you get a call from a loved one needing something, right? There should be a family code word.
Yep.
There should be some type of a phrase or a code word to verify the authenticity of the person on the other end. And the same thing with an employee. If an employee is in distress or an employee is making a request of sorts to transfer money, whatever, or passwords or whatever the case is, there should be some type of an internal dialogue between employees, coworkers, to verify and authenticate that request to determine if that person is who they say they are. There should be internal comms to make that determination. And I don't know that that has even been a discussion amongst employees at this point.
I mean, I don't think so because honestly, Robert, you know, for any first time listener, it would sound like something from a sci-fi or a spy or espionage movie. But I think this is so real out there because this is something I've personally like kind of had so many conversations with my parents. Because honestly, I think uh yeah, of course myself, but they are actually prone to that. And I think there should be more and more conversations because somewhere down the line we all have that, like Gen Z popularly call as FOFO, fear of finding out. But I think that is something, a hard reality that we all have to face. We have to fight it together, raise voices, and maybe that's where technology can be actually helpful. And God hope, I mean, I hope that, people do not use at least AI to bring out those internal codes. Let's just put some human brains into it and create an internal code, maybe for our family members, our loved ones, or friends, or our colleagues or employees. Yeah, I think that's a good way.
Yep, agreed. Yep. And we're all in this together.
Yep. Great, great, Robert. That this is such an important conversation, and of course, if listeners they would like to get more and more guidance, connect with you, share their thoughts about this conversation, what would be the easiest way?
I am online at Robert Siciliano. So if you were to just search Robert Siciliano, I'm all over the socials. And of course, my website is protectnowllc.com. Again, protectnowllc.com.
Wonderful, listeners. What I'm going to do is have all the show notes, links in the show notes. So just refer to them along with this episode on whichever platform you are listening to your podcast to. And as we wrap up, okay, let's let do something. Here's what I want you to take into the new year. Security, it isn't an IT thing. It is a life skill. It is the lifeboat. And identity theft prevention isn't just protecting your credit card or credit score. It is protecting your time, your peace, your relationships, and yes, your company too. So as you head into 2026, do the grown up glow up. Use a password manager, turn on multi factor authentication, two factor authentication, slow down when something feels urgent, verify with the second channel, and if you mess up, report fast. Shame is the scammer's best friend. Fear is the scammer's best friend. So, Robert, thank you once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you. Thank you. And to all the listeners out there, if this episode helped you, send it to one person, maybe your colleague, your friend, your loved one who still uses the same password everywhere. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Until next time, happy holidays, happy new year. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you next time on BizBlend. Thank you.